As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is focused on keeping our Loons in top condition. And with expertise in orthopedics, sports medicine, heart care, and more, Allina has the team to keep your family in the game too. The experts at Allina Health take the time to get to know you as a whole person, helping you achieve wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. It's an altogether better kind of healthcare. Learn more at allinahealth.org. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Sound of the Loons presented by Allina Health. We are fresh off a playoff round one victory against Real Salt Lake. Maybe people, I know there's a few people that didn't think that Minnesota United could do it because the pundits were shamed on Twitter and on X all over the place after Minnesota United came up with 2 wins in a row by penalty kicks. So today I get to be joined by the one and the only Dayne St. Clair, who has a massive smile on his face. He is so excited to be joining us for this podcast in the midst of a busy time of the season and before he heads out on an international break. Dayne, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Been a while for sure.
I was just going to say, I have here in my little rundown that the last time you were on was in May and we were talking about grilling and which I believe you have a Traeger. Is that correct?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So first you'll have to give me your favorite thing that you grilled all summer. And then secondly, you'll have to tell me, are you still trying to take advantage? Like actually right now, I don't know if in Blaine, but where I am, the sun actually finally came out. I felt like I was living in Seattle for a bit there.
Yeah, it's been definitely with the time change. It's been a little gloomy and darker days. Like driving up to the facility today, it was really foggy, but I think hopefully the sun will kind of keep out. And other than snowing on Halloween, it's been good. So as long as the sun cold stays away, I'm happy for sure.
2 years in a row of snow on Halloween. It's like the weirdest. It's like Mother Nature doesn't like Halloween because every other day this fall was like absolutely gorgeous, except for that day, which is kind of a problem for the kids. But so what's the favorite thing you grilled this summer?
Oof, I mean, a lot of that time got cut out because we're gone for Copa America for so long. But I mean, I feel like you can never go wrong with ribs, right?
That takes like a lot of time though. I mean, you gotta like prep the ribs, you gotta put stuff on the ribs. Like I mean, it feels like there's a little more like thought process that goes into that than throwing like steak or chicken on the grill.
I mean, once you get like the rub and stuff like that, it's just kind of checking in on it every now and then. But if you go low and slow, you gotta think about it or check on it. Sometimes if you do chicken and you forget about it for a couple minutes, is changes the trajectory a lot. Versus when you cook low and slow. So.
That's true. Like if I put the chicken on for too long and then I'm like, okay, now it's dried out. What do I combine my chicken with to make it like we're going to do pasta with this or like what? Because otherwise it's like dried out and my daughter's having trouble cutting it. So that's always a challenge. So coming off this playoff round one playoff series victory, I want to go back to let's just go back to the final regular season game, right? Let's go into decision day, which feels like it was an eternity now. October 19th, you guys playing St. Louis. St. Louis had nothing to play for technically. And you guys had positioning to play for. And then that last third of the season, the regular season, which Eric Ramsey kept talking about having this season in thirds, the beginning of the season, which was all kind of crazy, chaotic, getting coaching staff and others in position. The middle third, which you hit a bit of a bump. The team had a bit of a bump and maybe some people thought you weren't going to be able to come out of it. You get some transfers in, you kind of get things together. He talks about this final third of the season. I think you guys ended up with the best record in the Western Conference during that third of the season as far as points accrued. What was that like from your vantage point? Did you buy into this whole final 10 games of the season concept, after Leagues Cup? And what was it that made this team be able to get where it is today?
Yeah, it was definitely something that we very openly talked about in terms of it being a 10-game season for us. And we know that obviously we started off the season really well, and then kind of the dip when a couple guys were away at Copa America obviously was unfortunate to see from afar. But knowing that the way this thing works in the MLS, of course we would have wanted to be higher up in the table, but we knew that we were still gave ourselves a position to make the playoffs. And the thing that people remember who wins MLS Cup, no one remembers what seed you are, is kind of has been my mindset. So of course we want to be able to kind of be as high up in the standings as possible to play as many home games as possible and not have to travel. Especially, I mean, the crowd last game for the playoffs was the best I've seen it or heard it for sure. So you definitely have an advantage of playing, but we also know that we've done a good job on the road as well. And if we can kind of catch form at the right time, you want to be playing your best in the playoffs because no one asks you how you get there, but everyone remembers who lifts the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, I think how did you feel when decision day wrapped up? And I mean, you guys changed positions 3 or 4 times just within that game because of what other teams were doing or not doing as well. But when you guys officially found out that you were playing Real Salt Lake and it was going to be, 3 versus 6, and that you were going to head there first, a place that you had just been not too long before that. How did you feel when that matchup came about? What were your kind of thought process, in your mind when you knew you were going to be facing them?
I mean, I definitely wish it was a 5-4 matchup for us to just potentially get more home playoff games, but it wasn't the way it was. But when we matched up with Salt Lake, I was definitely like the matchup one. I mean, we just played them, so we were familiar with them and had gotten a point on the road, which obviously I think gave confidence to the guys. And then obviously with the way the kind of ending of that first game went, kind of left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths after they really realized what happened, because I think on the field in the moment no one really knew what was going on. And then of course when the replay starts showing and things like that, but then at that point it's really too late to react. So I knew that it gave us more fuel in the fire to kind of really kind of push on and to knock them out and move on past them.
Is there anything in particular with your game that you've seen change or develop throughout the season, and in particular in this last stretch? I mean, you've always been confident in your abilities, but changing of goalkeeper coaches, which you've had to deal with a few times now, and changing of how set pieces are dealt with in front of and around you, changing with your center backs again, and having a right-footed, left-sided center back, which I mean, people usually would say if you got a left-footed center back, why not put him in there? But just different things that have affected your game, changed your game, or how do you just hone in on what you have been able to accomplish this season, and especially this final third?
Yeah, I think going into it was going to be about consistency. I think that was kind of one of the biggest things that I wanted to improve on, because I know I've had great games for this club and for my country, but I think going into the season, really want to think about consistency. And I think especially after that Copa America, obviously our team's doing well. There's hope. I mean, I didn't play as much as I would have liked to, but I got a taste that it's under a new coach, obviously fighting for that one spot in the job being open. And of course, I think seeing how well Max played in the Copa America kind of pushed me to know that I had to raise my level if I wanted to compete there as well, and kind of bringing that confidence back here as well, I think was important for me. But then also knowing I was coming back into an important time. Obviously, we signed some players while I was gone, so wanting to prove to those new guys and show my worth to them. And then at the same time, you want to be playing in the playoffs. You want to be playing in the most important games. So like that, showing that consistency in those big moments, especially with a new coach, new sporting director, you never know how things are going to go. So just showing my worth to anybody that was willing to watch.
Just totally random here. Speaking of left-sided, right-footed center backs, Jefferson Diaz, did you happen to catch his Let's Play Hockey the other night? Or did
I
you
was
see
I
it?
was I wasn't there, but I did see the clip that Minnesota posted. So
What did you think? I first of all was like, kudos to him for going out there and doing it, because that's an intimidating arena, and everybody there is hardcore hockey, as you know, and being from Canada, you know, when you get passionate hockey fans, and it's not his first language. And Eric Ramsey swears he will never do it again because he was so awful. Like, what was your evaluation of it?
It's definitely than mine would have been if I would have had to do it in Spanish. So I'm definitely like proud of him too to obviously take on the task. I think obviously the quicker that the guys are able to adapt, especially to the language, the easier it is for everyone to kind of communicate on the field. So I think he's done a great job in terms of adapting with the mix of my Spanish and his a little bit of English. I think it's been a lot more clear in terms of communicating with each other, which obviously helps a lot in the field. And I think we've kind of set the tone where we know sometimes without saying what's going on, which has been a nice factor as well.
So Kelvin Uboa has come in and sort of lit the Minnesota United group on fire as far as, you know, goal scoring, which I think that's what he's brought in for. That's why he's getting paid. That's why he's got the DP tag, all those things, right? You want your number 9 to score goals. But it freed up a lot of others around him to do different things or maybe to play more freely. Hassani being one of them, Robin Lod being one of them. You know, you've seen Bongi kind of in a different light. But Kelvin's supposed to score goals. What does it mean when Sangbin came in a couple games ago? I believe it was the St. Louis game. Now I'm like getting them all screwed up in my head. But where he gets a couple goals and he hadn't scored in a while, he'd been coming off the bench. You get Rosales in a huge goal the other night. I mean, what does it mean for you guys as teammates to have those other players contributing and sort of finding a way to help this team get where they need to be?
Yeah, we know we have a lot of attacking talent, and I think although the stats say that Sangbin scored that game, I think it's also he's played a lot at right wing back and come on and done a really good job defensively. So in that game, he actually got to play a little bit higher up the field. So I think even though I don't know when his last goal before that was, but it's probably a little bit unfair because he was playing a lot further back, and when he was subbing in, it was to do more of defensive roles. But I think especially when him and Tanny come on together, you know the amount of pace and directness that the two of them bring together. So I think in those moments, I definitely wouldn't want to be on the opposing end of that, especially if you're got some tired legs, knowing that they can really stretch the field. And of course, we defend so well in our low block or mid block that it really opens up a lot of space once we win the ball for them to really kind of target those areas. So I think, I mean, a lot of credit to him to kind of playing back in his natural position in what had been a while. And with Joseph, I mean, we joked with him the whole season that he probably could have had a few, and I mean, obviously had a lot of assists this year, but we knew that it would come, and it came in the most important time and most important game of the season. So I keep saying to him that he got the dad strength now that after his baby was born. So that little extra boost for the ball to hit the back of the net.
He's got a little extra boost until he's not getting any sleep, and then we'll see how that translates, right? I'm sure that they're sharing the duties, but that's a whole different animal. So penalty shootouts. What is it about as a goalie that do you thrive off of? Do you look forward to? Do you like, oh God, no, please? Like, I mean, I'm sure you can't go into it with that mentality. Like, you're not going to say that, but like, do you thrive off of it? What's your mentality? What's your process? I saw you with a towel over your head before the last shootout. I was at the game as a fan, which was great. Do you not want people to talk to you? Like, what's your vibe, your routine with penalty kick shootouts? Especially, no, it's not just one penalty. It's an entire shootout.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a moment I thrive in. I think the bigger the moment, I'm always one to answer the call. And obviously, every time it's not going to go my way, but I feel like it's a place of the game where I feel confident in. I know my teammates feel confident in me, and obviously the coaching staff as well. But leading up to it, it's kind of I go and talk to the staff, and I kind of already have done my research before, so know for the most part when they're what guys are going to do for the most part. But just kind of reviewing it a little bit slightly with the goalie coaches on the side and the backup, and then kind of take my moment as well to just kind of center myself and focus on what I need to do. Obviously, normally in those moments, the coach is just going through the order, so it's not really like I need to hear it necessarily. and then right before you normally go back into it, into the huddle and talk. But I think taking some time for myself to really kind of center myself, and I'm the one representing the team on the defensive end in that moment. So really wanting to shine in that moment, and I feel a lot of trust from the guys uh, that have given it to me, and I think my record at this point is kind of speaking for itself a little bit. So I know that starts to apply even more pressure on the guys coming up. But I always think I'm going to get at least one, and then once I get the first one, I'm like I can go two or three, and gives ourselves an opportunity. So it's always something I always tell the team. I always tell the team, and I think they always know that you guys know I'm guaranteed to get at least one. So if you guys put the ball in the net, then you're good. And more times than not, I'm going to get two. So don't feel the pressure when you're up because you know you have two misses that the team can use.
So one of my broadcast partners for the Women's World Cup was a goalkeeper. And when we would get to penalty shootouts on occasion, or even just a penalty shot in a match, she hated it when someone would say the goalie guessed the wrong way. It drove her nuts. She's like, it's not a guess. Like
Mhm.
there's thought, there's, it's educated. You put time and energy into this.
Mhm.
Do you have the same sentiment? Be like, you're reading the body language. You're not guessing. This is like a legit, you're making an effort, just like they're picking a side when they're shooting.
For sure. I think obviously now even more. Before it used to just be like, are you diving left or are you diving right? But so many more shooters now are going down the middle. So I think before everyone used to be like, well, you have a 50% chance of getting it right. And it's like now it's like you have a 33% chance with the amount of shots down the middle. I mean, there is obviously some people that do guess. I think you make an educated decision is what I would call it. And
Yeah.
every time you're not going to get it right. And I think even sometimes it might play into, I know people that have looked at it in the past, well, if I dive three times one way and then if I go, they're not going to think that I'm going to dive the other way. So then they kind of look at the statistics like that. But for me, I look at each individual action as its own versus the collective.
So that's the other thing I've said in my mind. If you face the same guy a few times, whether you face him in like regulation and then you face Salt Lake, in two penalty shootouts in a row, like is it like a mind game where like, okay, he thinks that I think that he went that you know what I mean? Like, is he gonna go, or do you just read each individual shot on its own merit, not what the shooter did last shootout, not what they did in the game? Like you just read that moment.
For sure, it definitely becomes a bit of a double bluff in terms of who's going to change or who's going to stay the same. And I think for me, it probably benefits me because they're probably thinking about it more than I am. But obviously, I'm considering it a little bit. But in those moments, you got to go with your gut. I think too, it was nice the two shooters that went up first normally have a stutter run up, so I know I can kind of wait till the last second to really decide. Versus if I know a guy smashes the ball in the top corner one way every single time, then I can kind of take off early, but it kind of forces me to really wait and to really kind of show my presence. But I think obviously with my frame, it benefits me more because I know with every step I look bigger in the goal and there's more pressure on them in that moment as well. So I just try to make my move as late as possible.
Last penalty shootout question. How much do you hate the hesitation thing that shooters can do now up to the ball?
Yeah, it
Like I
definitely
hate it watching. I don't know how you feel about it. I'm like, that should be illegal. Goalies are you're already behind the eight ball with the penalty kick shootout. They should not be allowed to practically come to a stop and then restart.
it definitely creates a tougher dynamic, but unfortunately the rules don't favor us. I don't think shooting the ball from 11 yards really favors us regardless either way. So it's it's annoying, but it's part of the game. So I have to be able to adapt to those moments.
So you're advocating for the 1v1 from the midfield, like
I'm
dribble
not
up?
advocating for any of them, but I say like they're allowed to do that. Then if they do start it, maybe the goalie is allowed to have 1 foot, like be 1 foot ahead of the line or a step ahead or something like that to kind of try to counteract the movement. But I also know that it probably does benefit me a little bit too because I normally do go pretty late and try to wait for the shooters. So I know that my presence in the goal, I know I look big when they're looking up and waiting to that last split second. And I think that's why I've saved a couple of those stutter run ups. But they're definitely not my favorite run-up, but I don't know if any of the run-ups are my favorite, to be honest.
I don't know. I kind of think maybe MLS should go back to the like midfield, run all the way up. Like it's basically like a 1v1 thing. I don't know. I feel like some goalies would be really good at that, defending 1v1, but maybe not. I don't know. That could be taxing. Okay, so LA Galaxy, a team you're very familiar with. Played them obviously in the regular season. Now you've got a couple week break. The team has a couple week break before you face them in a one and done scenario. Did you imagine that LA Galaxy would manhandle Colorado the way they did? Were you surprised by that? Or like what are your thoughts when you saw that matchup, how it played out, and then just your thoughts on LA Galaxy?
Yeah, obviously they have a really potent attack, and we know that they play a really open expanse. So I think especially in the second game, the scoreline probably doesn't reflect it as much because Colorado obviously is down 1-0, so they have to really push for the game and try to get that goal to tie it up. So that probably the scoreline in that game probably doesn't truly reflect it. But at the same time, Colorado was missing key pieces, especially in the first game. I mean, Cole being gone, Georgia being gone, and I think the biggest thing for them, I mean, once they lost Moise Bombito, they were never really able to replace that defensive reinforcement. Obviously, playing with the national team with him, I know how good he can be and how under the radar he does when he can kind of cut things out. And I think that was kind of probably their biggest issue was that finding a player like that is obviously very hard to replace. But at the same time, I mean, we know the Galaxy is going to be open. They're going to be expansive. They're going to attack us. And we know that our low and mid block can be very strong and very frustrating for teams to break down. So I think it's being strong in those moments and that we might be able to kind of catch them on the counter in some of those moments. Obviously, playing at their field is one of the biggest fields in the stadium too, in the league too. So that plays a factor as well. So it's going to be an interesting game for sure. But it's one that I think that we can go in there and get a result and move on.
Who do you think on the Galaxy, if you had to pick one player that is the most dangerous out of Painsil, Peck, and Puig, Ricky Puig? I was almost going to say Puig. Puig. Which one would you say is the most dangerous?
I think Ricky, I think his tactical sense to be able to kind of pick up the balls in certain areas and drive with the ball, which forces defenses to collapse, and then he can find that killer pass to those guys in the front line, and really kind of can take the game. Obviously, and playing in the midfield too, it's a little bit easier than if you're a striker or a winger because you don't always determine how many touches you're going to get them on the ball. But playing in the middle, obviously, he likes to drop deep and get the ball from there as well and move up. But his ability to find passes and find spaces is definitely one of the top players in the league.
I know you're not going to be a part of it, but what is it like when you're trying to navigate these long breaks? I mean, 3 weeks or whatever it's going to be, 2.5, 3 weeks between games. That's a long time. And I don't know that there's probably any team that's in favor of that. Even if you're not healthy, that's just a long time, right? So how do you think the club is going to navigate that? It's not the first time they've had to do it this season. They've played through an international break. They were off during international break when you had all those new guys, and now off again for quite a bit of time. And you guys were on this crazy momentum. I'm a big fan of momentum and, carrying that through. How do you think the team's going to navigate it?
Yeah, the scheduling is definitely something that the MLS continues to look at, and I think needs to look at. Obviously, I'm definitely would rather the break than them having to play a playoff game while I'm away with the national team or having to decide between the two. So you definitely don't want to be playing during the international break, but I don't think that this break is ideal for anyone, especially with the momentum. I think the fans, I think the whole spectacle, I think obviously gets tainted a little bit, but at the same time, it's our job, and that's the reality of our situation is in 21 days or whatever it is now that we need to be ready to go in there and to get a result. And I'm sure LA is preparing to do the same. But I think for us, it's going to be managing, I think, obviously the intensity and the rest. And I think it's probably a little more difficult for me to talk about it than it's more so probably a coach's decision to kind of talk about it, especially because I'm not here during the international break, so I don't know fully how they're gonna navigate it. But I'm sure there'll be a balance of rest but intense trainings as well to kind of really push it and make sure that we're ready to go when we're in the galaxy that we don't even know the actual date yet for as well. So that's the
I
other
know.
factor to it.
I was looking at the
Both teams move
calendar,
on. Both teams move on, and we're like, oh, we still have to wait. Okay, cool.
which kind of doesn't make sense because both teams have moved on. Neither team is playing a game three. There's no, but anyways, I know I was looking at the calendar. I was searching it up, and I mean, I work for the league and I don't know what day anybody's playing on. So, last one, beginning of the season, if I had asked you the day you reported for preseason that this team would be where they are now and in the form that you are now, would you have guessed it, imagined it, thought it could happen, just knowing all the change that was happening and the uncertainty for that matter? I mean, anytime a team has a new coach, it's a challenge. But then when you throw in the interim to the interim, the coach coming in, after the season, the sporting director coming, all these things. Reynoso, which we haven't mentioned his name in an eternity, rightfully so, but normally a key piece for this club, not having been a part of it in any way. Would you have imagined that you guys would have been in this position, finished in sixth place, won a first round playoff series, and found a spot where you guys are clicking?
Yeah, I think when we reported, there was a lot more chaos and a lot of the things that you said hadn't even happened yet, or we didn't know what was going on. So we weren't sure how long Cam was going to be the manager for. We weren't sure what the direction was. So it was definitely coming into chaos. But I think at the same time, we knew that I'm a competitor. I would never say that our team's not good enough to make the playoffs or that we shouldn't be making the playoffs. I think at the bare minimum, especially with the amount of teams that make the playoffs now, I think what 9 of 13 or 14 or whatever it is are making the playoffs to, especially after not making it last year. I think I would always say that we're going to make the playoffs. And my always thing is once you make the playoffs, it's a brand new season. So I was confident that we could make the playoffs and definitely beat teams, especially now you're so close to it too, and you start to taste it a little bit. And of course, you got to take it one by one. But I don't know, we've played 40 games this year, and now we're 3 games away from winning it all. So I would definitely back myself in any moment going into any season. I think to go into a season and say that you're not going to be competing for a trophy is definitely not the mindset that I ever want to have or want to be a club if they're not going to be chasing those aspirations. So I would have said that we always have a chance, and I think once you make the playoffs, like I always say, no one remembers what seed. Everyone remembers who lifts the trophy.
Yeah, I mean Columbus is a good example of that this year, getting bounced in the first round, and I don't know that anybody predicted that, but the Red Bulls did what they needed to do. So hopefully Minnesota United can do what they need to do against LA Galaxy on the road. Date to be determined. I can't give it to the fans, but I think it's either the 23rd or the 24th maybe of November, which is before Thanksgiving, but after the international break. So look forward to seeing you in it during the international break. And then also, obviously, when you guys get back and head to LA and see what the scoop is with the group, and excited to see what this team does in the next round. So thanks for joining me, Dayne. I appreciate it. Enjoy your international break and whatever training sessions you have left before you head out. And we'll see you late November.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dayne. Have a good day. All right, everybody, stay tuned. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons coming up next with Andrew Wiebe from MLS Season Pass. Are you ready to take your Loons fandom to the next level? Join Minnesota United's official season ticket waitlist, The Preserve, for just $25 to get early access to tickets and first shot at securing available season tickets in 2026. Visit MNUFC.com/tickets/preserve to become a member today. All right, everybody, welcome back. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons. And now we get to have a national pundit on the podcast, so we can get the full scope, although he is wearing a Minnesota United jersey, which, there you go. I love it. I love the kit. You can't go wrong with that choice. Did you get the Starry Night, Andrew Wiebe, or is that it? Did it get lost in the mail from Eric?
No,
Durkee?
I have the Starry Night, and I was looking through my large Tupperware of jerseys. and I just couldn't find it. And the reason being, my sons like to go through it, and they either wear them while they play soccer in my basement. So you can imagine a 4 and a 6-year-old running around in men's larges. It looks like dresses, but they love it, and they imagine they're the players. And then they also will set up all the jerseys downstairs and have a store. So there was a recent soccer jersey store, and I'm guessing Starry Night is at the bottom of the container. And I got lazy, Kyndra. I couldn't dig down there when I saw what is this one? This is the Northern Lights, I think.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, good call there, because I had a hard time, recollecting that in the moment there, because I feel like the amount of jerseys that MLS and the teams and the clubs put out now, I mean, first of all, is like
veritable flood. Yes.
It's a veritable
not
flood.
Complaining,
though.
I
was just going to say, I'm not complaining. And the creativity and some of it bringing back the old school vibes, all the kind of stuff, like a Wizards jersey comes about and my daughter's like, what is that? And I have to like explain it, and there's some that
I've got that one over here too. The old school one. Yeah.
And some you don't want to come back, and that's fine too. Like some go away for a reason, but I appreciate the Minnesota United jersey. And just first and foremost, how has the season been for you? You give us your version of what you do every week on MLS Season Pass, Extra Time as well. I mean, you got a whole host of duties throughout the week, but even on game days, what's it been like for you now? Year number 2 in this iteration.
This has been a great year. I really enjoyed year number 1, and it was sort of getting my feet wet with Season Pass and more being a pundit and an analyst rather than a host, because for so long I had sort of slid into that host role. But I really think that having the experience as a host helps me on the analyst side, helps me understand what the hosts are doing, how they might come to me, how I can, best keep the show flowing. And it also gives me a little bit more space to sit back and think and ruminate on the game, as opposed to asking only other people's opinions about it. And I still manage to do that within our shows, because look, if you're sitting next to, Brad or Sasha or Kaylin or Lloyd Sam or Kaylin Carr, whoever, fill in the blank, inevitably, I'm still a fan and a journalist. I think of myself more as a columnist in all of this, and I want to hear from them. I want to ask them a question, even if I have my own take. So it's busy. I'm not going to lie, but it's busy with the thing that I would be doing anyway, which is talking about this league and about soccer, and doing so with friends. So I spend a lot of time during the week talking to coaches. I spend a lot of time watching games, and oftentimes that is on 2 or 4 times speed, because there are 29 teams in this league, and if you want to watch everything, or at least, in my case, I'm trying to watch at least hit the 50% mark and then cherry pick the rest if I need to. That's difficult. Time is of the essence. So I'm almost at the point, Kyndra, when I watch a live game, I'm like, yeah, speed it up. Like, let's go, speed it up. All these, like, I have the little button where I can skip ahead 5 seconds. So anytime I have a stoppage in play, the ball goes out for a throw in, I'm like, yeah. Okay, come on, let's go. And it's sort of broken my brain in that way. But no, it's been a great time. I get to talk about the league, think about the league, live and breathe the league. And I'm just so thankful to have the opportunity to do so.
I do that sometimes with the Extra Time podcast, but I try not to do it so much that you sound like chipmunks, because like you just can't get through it all. And you want to know everything, and you want to hear everything, and you want to take it all in. And soccer is not like any other sport. I love recording hockey. If I can fast forward through those intermissions, if I can fast forward through, like obviously Minnesota being a big hockey state, but you can't do that with soccer. You can speed it up, but you can't, there's no recording because you're not gaining anything. So you have to watch it.
What I get from the 2 and 4 times is generally where the game is being played.
Yeah.
What sort of shape the teams are trying to put themselves in with the ball and against the ball, how they react to certain situations, where that game was played, like what part of the field was Minnesota United trying to attack? What part of the field are they trying to essentially protect and route their opponents? And then you can always go back. Like I'm sitting there waiting for the moment where I'm like, that was interesting. That was something I was looking for. Let's go back to 1-time speed and watch it in real time and really dig in on it. But yeah, man, 29 teams is a challenge. It really is a challenge. My personality is such that I'm sort of obsessive. When I find something, like you give a dog a bone, like I'm not letting go of it. And so that applies to my professional life with MLS for the last basically 15 years. I'm super into fishing right now. So like I am watching fishing YouTubes and like looking at, different techniques and how
fly fishing?
No,
reel and rod fishing?
Reel and rod fishing.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And or like,
are you gonna start making your own lures in the basement?
No, my wife asked
me
that. My wife asked me that. And I said I don't think I'm gonna get to that point when you can buy a plastic for like $3.50 or whatever it is. So Yeah, but that's where I'm at with MLS. I love the league. I love the culture of it. I think every club, every player, every coach has a unique story, and I'm fortunate. My job is just to try to figure those out on a daily basis.
I would like to ask you what the biggest upset was out of the first round of the ones that are done, but that might be a silly question because I
Yeah,
feel like everybody would probably say the same thing right now, and I'm guessing you would say Red Bulls Columbus, but maybe I'm wrong.
no, you're absolutely right. Anybody who didn't say Red Bulls Columbus, you'd have to look at them kind of funny and be like, "Well, with you,
Yeah.
what's going on here with you? Defending champs out to this team that had won twice in 90 days." I was at the second game, and obviously I was in the studio for the first game. I was just so impressed by the way that Sandro Schwartz set up his team. It was clear he was going to need to do something different to disrupt the way that the Crew just dominate the ball and inevitably get themselves into what amount to transition opportunities. And he did it in a formation change, I think a level of pressure that we haven't seen all the time for the Red Bulls. That first half in the first game in particular, they were just, I mean, if they had the opportunity to push all the way into the 18 of the Crew, they were doing it. And then I just give credit to the players. Like, it's one thing to have a plan. Everybody comes into a game with a plan. Like, and if you don't, you're probably not going to have that job very long. You come in the game with a plan, and then usually the Crew punch you in the mouth or show you that your plan is obsolete and break it. And the Red Bulls players put in such a Herculean effort just in terms of the ground that they covered, the collective nature that they had to embody in those moments. And then, they didn't take advantage of all their chances, but sometimes you just need one, and that's all they needed. Set pieces matter in the playoffs. And so I've been very critical of New York all season long, for a few seasons, to be honest, in the sense that this is a major market New York team, and I want them to embody the idea that they want to go win anything, not even everything. Just go embody the fact that you want to go win anything. And I really took it to them during that transfer window in the summer, and I stuck by all that. But, it turns out that Carballo was a pretty good signing. And what really is important is that they got their best player, Emil Forsberg, healthy at the right time. That is the ultimate playoff elixir. If a guy like that is healthy, on form, and contributing, you've got a chance. And now the Red Bulls got a chance, which I didn't think they had before that series.
Well, and I think oftentimes in soccer, people, one person can't necessarily change the game, as in maybe other sports. When you only have 5 on a court or 5 on a rink or whatever, talk about in baseball even, right? It's a very singular 1v1 matchup between the batter and the hitter, as we have all these sports going on right now in the United States. But Emil Forsberg actually was capable of doing that. Which normally
Yes.
I don't say in soccer. Yes, you need your star player, but everybody else has to be on some level or at least the same page, or the ideas. And there's too many other variables out there. You can't just have one guy that's going to dribble everybody and dominate a game.
Yeah.
But he doesn't dominate a game, but with the way he plays, it made everybody better around him, and it made everybody, it was kind of like magical watching it happen.
He doesn't dominate games, and there's very few players that do, right? And the ones that do are it's like Messi, it's like Ronaldo, and it just sticks out. You'll never forget those sorts of players. Well, the way I would say is that Emil Forsberg dominated moments within that series. And the moments were when the ball turned over and the Red Bulls found his feet. Could that be a transition moment? I mean, for somebody not Emil Forsberg, maybe not. Maybe they don't have the composure. Maybe they don't have that touch to take them away from pressure and open up the passing lane. Maybe the players around them don't believe that player is going to do it, and so their runs are just 15% less committed. It just felt like everybody on that field, including Columbus, and maybe not enough, understood that when Emil Forsberg got the ball and was able to beat a guy and face forward, he was going to make the right decision, the right pass in the right moment at the right time, and that was going to lead to special things. And I think that belief aspect can go a long way. Like at this time of year, if you don't have that little extra bit, maybe it's belief in your tactics, maybe it's belief in the players around you, maybe it's just enough belief to run your what off for the full game and not have that moment where you just say, this might not be for us. I think he gave the Red Bulls that belief of saying, well, we got Emil Forsberg. Why not? Let's go see if we can do it.
Just one last question on that. Actually, it's not even necessarily just on that. And I know Bradley Wright Phillips, and I know you were not in the studio for that game because I believe you were both at the game. But in general, what is it like to be in studio? Because we've seen like those clips where like that camera behind you and you guys are all sitting in your chairs watching games, watching moments unfold, whether it's a banger, whether it's a defensive play, it's a miss on whatever it might be. What's it like being in studio watching the games and the bit that we don't get to see from you guys, like in amongst that group?
I would say during the season, it's a mad dash to just absorb as much information as humanly possible. You know, the 360 crew are up in the big studio, and after I do Countdown, the pregame show, I'll head downstairs and I'll be watching on 5 or 6 TVs, and we're just, you know, it's myself, it's Anders Arhus, who's one of our crack producers, it's Mark Connolly, who's, in my mind, the best researcher MLS has ever had. And we're just sitting down there yelling at each other. You know, like, do you see this? Like, hey, to eyes to this screen, this game's popping off. Big goal here, big moment here. Take notes, take notes. The beautiful thing about the playoffs is it just, for me, everything has happened so fast this year, and that's why I often have to go back during the week and watch again. But during the playoffs, it's all slowed down, and it's all
It's
right
a smaller sample
there. Yeah,
size.
it's all right there in front of you, and we don't have overlap. So I feel like when I go in for a match night, I walk out of it with all this information that I've filed away. I walk out of it knowing that when I was on Wrap Up, you know, I was able to really express opinions that I felt extremely, extremely grounded in, which is not to say I can't do that on Wrap Up in a normal show during the season, but boy, I got to do some real legwork in that 5 or 6 hours of games happening to make sure I'm digging in and really assuring myself that I have all the information. I've watched the pieces or all of the stuff I need to. I know what the coaches said, all that stuff. So, man, thank God for the playoffs. To me, it's the best time of year. Everything slows down. We get to watch the games. Oftentimes, you got games 5 times a week in these first rounds, and that's all I'm asking for is the ability to watch and enjoy and savor.
Does everybody's bias come out just a little bit? Because you got, you know, Bradley Wright Phillips with the Red Bulls. You got Clair. He played on a few teams.
Sure.
Kevin Egan is like an Atlanta homer, even though he'll never admit it. You know, like everybody's, Caitlin Kyle has her, you know, she's a little bit tied to Miami from her past. And then you got Caitlin Carr, who's got Houston. Does it all kind of like, does it sort of leak out, not intentional or unintentional, but you're like, come on.
How can
like
it not? You know,
right?
That's
part of being a fan and a former player.
And I think it's also, you know, it's not always in seriousness. You know, a lot of times it's just us, you know, taking it out of each other. And I'm like, oh, but you know, and
really?
I like to mess with Brad on the shows whenever we're talking about Red Bulls. And yeah, you know, you have all those little things. I'll raise my hand and say I have no biases. I'm completely unbiased.
Yeah.
My only bias, I would argue, is actually I truly do root for teams that make my job more entertaining, more fun, and give just a deeper level of enjoyment to the league. Like I want to see teams that have an identity. I want to see teams that go out and make the signings and do the things to try to advance themselves from, you know, average or below average or even above average to truly great. I think the way that this league is going to get to where it wants to go is when all 29 teams have a singular goal in mind, and that's to just be as good as they can possibly be and are actively making the decisions that fuel that. And if you do that, you might not make the playoffs, but you can still look in the mirror every year and be like, we're headed in a direction that's, you know, cogent and logical, and we're investing to do so, and next year will be our year. That's the beauty of MLS.
Awesome. So I want to get to the Minnesota United matchup, but I want to go back to Minnesota United, Real Salt Lake, and LA Galaxy, Colorado. As you just talked about, two teams or teams with an identity, teams with a plan, teams that have made progress maybe in their signings and their decision making. So LA Galaxy, Colorado. We can talk about LA Galaxy and their season and maybe, you know, Greg Vanney finally getting the pieces, Gabriel Pack, Paintsel, Joveljic feeling good, you know, Ricky Puig, you can talk about him all day. But does Galaxy fit that bill? Do they fit that bill that they
Absolutely.
have made the strides? And then did you see them beating Colorado the way they did in both the games?
I did see that coming, Kyndra, and I feel bad for Colorado because their season just ran out of momentum at the wrong time. You know, all these very positive, you know, big, like, wow, huge steps for this organization happened throughout the year, whether it's Moise Bombito developing, it's Georgi Mihailovic and Hafa Navahu coming in and being purchased for big numbers, Cole Bassett rediscovering sort of himself and his drive, and obviously Chris Armas coming back to the league and saying, hey, all those thoughts you had about me, about as a head coach, whether or not I could hack it, well, here's the proof that I can. All that sort of coalesced over the course of the year and then really came to a head during Leagues Cup. And it was beautiful to watch from afar that club have their moment. And then the bottom just sort of dropped out. The issue for the Rapids was depth. And when you sell Moise Bombito, your best defender, Your depth is going to be tested. They didn't have enough of it on the back line. Then Cole Bassett goes down at the end of the year. He's irreplaceable within this team. He sets the tone. He's sort of the heartbeat, to me, of the group. And then Georgie gets hurt at the wrong time. And all of these injuries, all of these issues, and I think also just mental and emotional fatigue came into play. And when you're in that position and you haven't had great matchups against the Galaxy in the past, and the Galaxy come into the playoffs with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder from decision day, knocked down to the 2 seed, that is a bad recipe.
Not just knocked down, but to LAFC.
Yes. And then you give up 2 bad goals to start games in the first half. Like, I didn't think the Rapids were particularly bad for 180 minutes. They were bad for maybe 85 minutes. The other part, they were all right. But when you give away goals to the LA Galaxy and force yourself in a position where you have to push numbers forward, that is like, that's candy for Ricky Pooch. He's like, what's that? There's now space in behind. What's that? You're going to have to stretch yourself a little bit. Those little movements in the midfield where he gives and goes and he sprints for 10 yards and you're like, this guy shouldn't be this fast. And then all of a sudden he's in behind your back line and he's celebrating with a baseball bat made out of Darjeeling on this. I mean, it was inevitable to me that once the ball started rolling downhill for the Galaxy, it was going to turn into a snowball, and it did. So, hey, congrats to the Rapids. There's progress to be made. Just like I just said about, hey, I want teams to challenge themselves for more. I want that for the Rapids. Double down. Don't make it just Hafa and Georgie and, okay, now how far can we go next year with a little more time together? Go get yourself a DP winger who's goal dangerous, who can be maybe you aren't going to get a Gabriel Peck. Can you get a Joseph Painsil? Can you get even a Bongi Hangwane would be a huge upgrade for that team. So go upgrade, and now Minnesota are looking at that Galaxy matchup and licking their chops because, defensively, they are in absurd form right now, Kyndra. I don't think the attack is necessarily firing away, but when you give up 0 game goals most games or 1 some games, you're going to be in a great position in the playoffs.
Well, and when you look at this LA Galaxy side and how much fun they are to watch and just how they execute, how they go about it, like you never know where it's going to come from because so many different players can be so dangerous. And for me, it was kind of fun to see Joveljic sort of be able to be himself because he had been behind Chicharito. He had others, that were in front of him, and how is he going to play and why isn't he starting? Every time he comes in, he scores a goal, and he seems like this great kid. I'll call him because I'm old, but then to see him sort of be free and to see the happiness of the way they all play together. And then you get some of those veterans on the team, like a Mark Delgado, being able to feel that. And even Greg Vanney, like the weight that must have been lifted off his shoulders for the disaster it was a little bit when he came to the Galaxy.
Remember last year was an emotional low point for this club. I'm not going to say all time, but you're in that argument, where the fans are saying this isn't it for us. The results aren't there on the field, despite the fact that you have Ricky. There needed to be a big overhaul, and credit to the Galaxy. They went out and made it. They moved on in the front office. They went and got Will Kuntz, who clearly knows what he's doing and has helped pull in the right players. Like, they did the things that you're supposed to do, including spending $20 million plus on wingers. And they got their just reward. It doesn't always happen that way, but GMs always talk about process. And I'm sure Khalid Ahmad is talking about that all the time there, about sticking to your process. And you have a plan, don't deviate, don't panic. The Galaxy didn't panic. They just went out and got the right guys in the right moments of their careers, and now they're reaping the rewards. And yeah, I'm with Ricky in a sense of like, I wish it wasn't so far away that this matchup was going to happen. Like, I want it next week. I don't want to wait. I'm impatient. I want to see Minnesota test themselves against this Galaxy team. And I've said on record many times, I think the West goes through Los Angeles, whether it's the Galaxy now or it's LAFC in the next round, knock on wood, if they get there. I still think the city of Los Angeles is going to be the one to reckon with when it comes to a spot in MLS Cup.
So Real Salt Lake, Minnesota, 3-6 matchup in the first round. And I don't think I thought that Minnesota would win at Real Salt Lake just because of the nature of Real Salt Lake's home record. Pablo Mastroeni, he's, so meticulous and thoughtful and intentional about the way he goes about things. It's hard to play at elevation. These teams don't score goals against each other. And then I thought Minnesota would win at home and it would go back to a game 3. And then it could have been anybody's. Then maybe Minnesota could find a way in a penalty shootout or something like that. what did you see from this series and this matchup in particular that went well for Minnesota, that didn't go well for Real Salt Lake, and was it Salt Lake being poor in an area, or was it Minnesota forcing an issue in something?
It's not. It's a combination. It always is, right? And I wouldn't say it's RSL being poor. I just think RSL lost themselves in the summer. And that is the risk of the way that the season is set up and the summer transfer window. And Andres Gomez was such a game-changing player for them in terms of production, but in terms of their game model, and perhaps most importantly, in terms of just the vibes that he and Chicho Arango had. I mean, you're talking about those 4 months to start the season. That's like once in a lifetime stuff. You may never get that again. That sort of relationship, that sort of production, that sort of just innate magic where it feels like anything and everything you do just comes off. And those two guys had it. Like, they really, really connected. And so by the time we got to the end of the season, well, that's gone because Andres is gone. And Chicho's suspended for a spell and has to be outside the facilities, not even with the guys. That's a personal blow as well as a form blow because he's just not there to do it. And he never got the form back. And the magic for RSL was twofold. One, it was, it was the way that they were playing in that formation in sort of a 3-5, it depends on how you want to put it, sort of like a 3-4-2-1. And then you take away the wide goal scorer, you take away the striker, and you put all the pressure on everybody else. And many of those guys hadn't experienced that sort of pressure in their careers. I'm thinking of like an Anelli who was so brilliant, but to ask him for a full season at D-mid is just such a difficult thing on an elite team. They weren't themselves. And so that's why I picked Minnesota. I picked Minnesota for the quote unquote upset because I felt like Minnesota had gone the opposite direction, which is that Eric had been trying to find the right mixture for most of the first half of the year into Leagues Cup. And then the transfer window came and, it's like you're making a batch of cookies and you're like, guys, we don't have chocolate chips and, we don't have any flour. Like it's just not coming together right. And then you go get it in the transfer window. And Jefferson Diaz is that guy. Certainly Kelvin Yeboah has been that guy. We're still sort of waiting for Joaquin Pereira to really be that guy, but it's still early and he shows flashes. And all of a sudden, everything started to make sense, right? Like you get into this 5-4-1 defensively, you hit on the break. At home, you really put the pressure higher up the field on other teams. And you start to build belief and you start to build momentum. And there were all these pieces that had been there that are really good. And they fit in and they started believing. And it just, at the right time of the year, the ball started rolling downhill. And now it's a question for this club of how long can they keep it rolling? That's the beautiful thing about this time of year. If you get on a nice little stretch, if you feel confident in what you're doing on the field, if you have a hot goalkeeper, what's up, Dayne St. Clair, you got every chance in the world of doing something special. It's just one game. This is a good road team. They just got to go to LA and find a way. Maybe not even win. Maybe do it in penalties. And if they get there, man, I'm not betting against Dayne St. Clair.
Speaking of momentum and the ball rolling downhill and both of these clubs feeling it, it's a long break before that next game. And I know there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's the calendar. It's the international. Nobody wants to play during the international window and miss your key people. But also 2.5, 3 weeks, whatever it is, November 23rd or 24th. They haven't even actually said when they're playing yet. Like, that's a long time for two teams that don't have a game 3. So you're glad you don't have a game 3, but you've just got a long break in here. What does that do for these two clubs? How do you navigate that?
In some ways, I think it's better for Minnesota United. I really do, because the way that the Galaxy were playing against Colorado makes sense that they would be like, let's play tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't want to wait. Like, we're feeling it, man. Like, we're an attacking team in form, scoring goals with that little voice in the back of our heads that says, yeah, hell yeah, try that. You can do it. Why not? Like, take that guy on. Like, shoot that. Attack, go. Get it done. Do it with abandon and do it at home because we haven't lost there. I think it benefits Minnesota United because, look, for one, the attack isn't quite clicking the way that I think Ramsey would want it to. But I think that defense and the structure and the overall commitment that they have to keeping the ball out of the middle of the field, basically, that doesn't go anywhere with a break, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and that amount of time to scout LA Galaxy is so valuable for this team because it's just going to be Eric Ramsey figuring out where the gaps present themselves when the Galaxy push numbers forward, because they're going to push numbers forward. They're going to be at home. They're an attacking team. This is what they want to do. So how deep do you sit? Where do you look when that ball turns over? How do Where does the pressure come when you get on the ball? Who is making the runs? Where are those runs? What are the weak spots? I think giving Eric Ramsey this much time to scout and get his defensive structure in place and then set the counter off of that, and also look at set pieces because that's an LA Galaxy weakness as well. That to me, those are some ingredients for a potential upset here. I don't think it's one-sided. I think Minnesota United have every chance to shock the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I also think too, when you're talking about time spent to scout the LA Galaxy having more of the momentum right now as far as just feeling like they want to go and play tomorrow. But I just feel like it's more even just a training regimen, trying to keep, I know Minnesota, I think just had a couple days off and you're trying to keep guys engaged, but you're trying to keep them fresh. You throw in some other games, you play 11v11 against your own side, you play your twos, what do you do where you're trying to find that balance? It doesn't take long to get out of shape. You
100%.
want everybody to be healthy. Just that even like mental, physical mind game that the whole coaching staff for both clubs is going to have to kind of go through and navigate during this time.
The other thing is you got a bunch of guys leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to do that with guys leaving. And the one thing I will say about MLS, and I wish that international breaks were just blanks for everybody. But that's not the case. And in some ways, that's your training ground for these moments, right? Like, this is not new for most clubs.
Yeah.
That you would have an international break in this period of time that could potentially throw off your momentum. Like, and so Eric Ramsey certainly has been through this year. Mm-hmm. He's had these moments to figure out, okay, well, we got 2 weeks. What do we do in those 2 weeks? How do we prepare our guys? How do we keep them fresh? What happens when they come back? And I think that's a big sort of under-discussed part of all this is what happens when Dayne St. Clair gets off a plane from Suriname? What happens when Boxall comes off games in New Zealand, or fill in the blank with whoever's going wherever on this particular international break? How do you get their bodies right? One, how do you reintegrate them into the group immediately? Like, what's the right pacing there? And again, I mean, that's where you have practice doing it. And so that's a test for the coaches, right? It's not just a test for the players when they step on the field. This 3 weeks or 20 days now or whatever it is at this point in time, that is a test for these managers. It's bigger than just, can I put a game plan out there? It's, can I have my guys truly ready in that moment to perform at their peak?
Couple game threes, and this is before I get your MLS Cup final prediction. Who advances in the rest of these game threes that we have? Because we're not fully set. Here we are talking about a conference summit, but like we
hey, some people don't got to worry about game threes, Kyndra.
I know some people are just beyond that. Like you and I are just talking right past it. But of the game threes that are out there, who advances in each side?
Ooh, boy, predictions in MLS. That's a good way to look stupid.
But I got to do it. It's a great way for people to give you crap on Twitter.
It's okay. I don't care. They can come at me on Twitter all day long. I enjoy it. I would say I think that Vancouver have a real chance at this. I thought they played well in LA, and they played even better at home, and the breaks went their way. If I had to pick an upset, I think Vancouver is probably my most likely one. I don't see Inter Miami losing. I think they've been on cruise control, and I don't think Messi and Suarez and you would think Busquets, but his health might be an issue, would allow them to lose that game. Look, the talent deficit is massive, right? It really comes down to whether Inter Miami can actually stop giving up bad chances. But I just think they'll find a way at home to get the 3 or 4 goals that they need. I want to believe in Charlotte. I just don't think so. At Orlando, they're not sharp enough in the final third. They're not sharp enough in those critical moments in games where, like we were talking about with Emil Forsberg, you take a potential counterattack or transition moment and turn it into a true goal scoring chance. They're not sharp enough in those moments. Maybe Pat Biel can help them in that sense. But I just think Orlando City will find a way at home. And then I've got my money on Cincinnati. New York City are pretty young. They're pretty poor on the road. And Cincinnati have been the ultimate wild card in the East. But I just think this group, with the level of talent and difference makers that they have, Pat Noonan as a coach will get them ready. If they come out and show us the intensity that they had the final 45 minutes of game 1 instead of the sort of lackadaisical side of that we saw in game 2, I think that they'll handle that one. But so Vancouver my choice. But man, Kyndra, as I talked through all of these, I was like, I don't think, but plausible, completely plausible that Atlanta just did it. Like Charlotte could do it. Like New York City could do it. And I mean, that's what I've enjoyed the most about these playoffs. I started it all by saying only great teams win MLS Cup these days, because it's been since 2010 since a okay team got it done. But there's some okay teams, quote unquote, that are throwing a wrench in the in the gears and saying, well, what you thought you knew might not be true.
Well, and then who did you have in your bracket for MLS Cup final?
I had LAFC against Inter Miami.
Okay, and you're sticking with that.
I'm still alive.
Okay, but would you stick with that anyways? You just said you could see Vancouver upsetting, but
I can. I'm gonna. You know what? Pressed on it, I'll stick with LAFC. The first goal is everything in that game on Friday night. LAFC, once they get the first one, are nearly unbeatable. So Vancouver really got to focus on finding a way to create the chances and finishing. Game one, they hit the post twice, and really that was the game. Once LAFC got their goal, it was going to be downhill from there. So I'm going to stick with it. I still think the West goes through LAFC. I just think their brand of soccer in the playoffs is proven, and the Galaxy are intoxicating, but they're not proven in the playoffs. Like, they don't have that like juice. They don't have that run. They don't have that experience. They don't have the moments to go back and say, oh yeah, they can get it done. Oh yeah, when the time is big and the spotlight is on them, they don't screw up on set pieces. They don't give up that bad counterattack goal. So I'll stick with my prediction with the caveat that if I'm wrong, and at Andrew_Wiebe, let me know.
And then let me know. Who wins it?
I've got Miami.
Oh, you got Miami.
I just think there's a element of not fate, but overwhelming odds in terms of a group of players. Talent are always going to have the massive advantage, and just like Messi and Suarez just don't lose in these moments.
Well, I was just going to say that everybody keeps talking about their talent, which obviously is undeniable. But you're also talking about the pedigree of these guys and their competitiveness.
Yeah.
Like, they have to be real upset about the result in Atlanta, and just like coming back to Miami. I mean, I'm just going back to this series. But then when you get to a final, like, they don't care at what level it's at. Like, the competitiveness and those juices, they just don't want to lose. And I'm not saying LAFC doesn't have that same vibe, but then the talent is going to outweigh that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
100%.
know.
100%. There's a reason why they've won everything together.
Yeah.
And like that experience goes a long way. And it's part of why I have doubts about the Galaxy, because, when you get pushed to the limit or you have a moment where it's like, you either make a play or you go home, I'm going to go with the guys that have made a play and sent the other people home 9.5 times out of 10 for their entire career over everybody else. There's a reason why they got 74 points, despite the fact that they often didn't play particularly well. They just find a way, and they have more difference makers on the field in the 11 and more off the bench than just about anybody else. They've got weaknesses. It's true, but I think in the end we'll see a historic double from Inter Miami, and if we don't, that will be arguably an even bigger story.
Okay, I lied. I just have one more Minnesota United question. I know we've been all over the place.
Sure.
I'm not very good at staying on track here. It's kind of like how my brain works, but. Who has to be the best player on the field against the Galaxy for Minnesota United to win that game?
The best player on the field. I think it's got to be somebody. Probably it's Hassani and Will Trapp. Because the way the Galaxy want to attack you and the way Ricky plays, he really wants you to start following him.
God, deeper. He's a little, he's a punk. He's a punk.
And it's
so
awesome.
Good.
I love him. He's like arguably my favorite player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
As an entertainer, he's top tier. And if you like him, you love him. And if you don't like him, you hate him. And that's beautiful. I just think that what he likes to do is pull off out of those traditional 9 positions, and he hopes that you follow him. Because if he can get in a little combination play and get face forward, he is going to run past you. He does not look like a sprinter, but that dude is stupidly fast, especially on the ball. And once he picks up momentum, their entire attack just sort of like follows him. And if the Galaxy are attacking with momentum, they're almost impossible to stop, because you have 2 both goal dangerous and assist forward wingers on the wings. Jovelic's movement up top and his ability to finish is, at the very top of Major League Soccer. And then you have the most, I would say, outside of Messi, probably the most dynamic attacking player in the league, in the sense that he can do all these different things at an extremely high pace. Like, he doesn't need to slow himself down to be effective in terms of the final ball or the finish or combination play around the 18. Like, he just does it at such a fast pace, it's hard to keep up with. So Hassani and Will are going to have to be really cognizant of those moments when Ricky starts building momentum, when he starts combining in the midfield, when they want to step and he wants them to step so that he can give and play in behind them and run in behind them. the discipline they're going to have, the physicality that they're going to have. It's on them essentially to protect that back line. And ultimately, this is the area of the field that Eric doesn't want attackers. He doesn't want other teams to penetrate. And they have been so good at it. And so much comes down to those two sitting there and preventing it. It's just they haven't faced Ricky yet at least in money time. So we'll see who cashes the checks.
Well, back to that point, this may be important then for that couple week rest, because Will Trapp could probably use it. Hassani Dotson wouldn't hurt to have a little bit of rest, because they've been doing a lot of work as the regular season wound down and then into the playoffs, the amount of running and the amount of ground that they have to cover. So if they have the task of chasing Ricky around, or at least passing him off and covering him, this couple week may benefit them. So that may be a good thing. So, well, thank you. Doubt. Thank you, Andrew Wiebe, for joining me. I know we already went over the time because we could talk. We didn't even hit every single game and every single matchup. I could talk
forever. That's on me. I just start blabbing, Kyndra. Once I start talking MLS, I'm like, oh, this is fun. We could do this forever.
Right. I know it. There's just so many good matchups. There's so many good games out there. The playoffs have been phenomenal. We didn't talk about some of the other teams that already got knocked out with like the Seattle-Houston series, and we could go on and on and on. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got your hands full, a lot of work and a couple little ones running around. So I appreciate it.
You can hear them upstairs, huh? It's a full fall break.
I can't. I just know how it is. I get it. So
they're probably yelling upstairs, let us down so we can kick the ball in the basement. But yeah, look, if people want that talk, of course, we've got on Extra Time. We did the whole breakdown from the match 2 of the game best of 3 series on Monday, and on Thursday we're going to look ahead to these final 4 games in round 1, and then we'll take a long break and come back to it for the conference semifinals. So
awesome. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks everybody for tuning into another episode of Sound of the Loons. Maybe we'll catch you again before that semifinal game against LA Galaxy. If not, probably shortly thereafter. Thanks everybody.